Hi, and thank you for joining today's discussion on PwC's latest South African Consumer Insight Survey. I'm Kevin Clayton from PwC, and today I'm joined by our consumer market leaders, Suleiman Javri, our consumer market lead, Anton Hugo, our Africa retail industry lead, Lulu Krichel, PwC's chief economist and ESG Africa lead, and Rian Singh, our strategy and digital partner in the practice. So this is our fifth pulse of the survey. It's a global survey that takes place across 25 countries. But today we are going to unpack and discuss the feedback from 500 South African participants. And to really kick us off, Lulu, I'm going to start off with one of the real big messages that came out of this pulse. And that was that 72% of South Africa's spending class are either very or extremely concerned about their personal financial situation. Does that surprise you?
Kevin, unfortunately not. It was a really tough year for South African consumers, even worse than the previous years. We had record levels of load shedding. And in fact, in the last quarter of last year, we had load shedding every single day. And for the year, it was worse than the previous 3 years combined. In addition to that, the Reserve Bank continued to increase interest rates on the back of very high levels of inflation. And it was particular, if you look at the inflation basket, it was particularly goods that are the basics, foodstuffs, transport costs, petrol, etc., that really had an impact on what happened to consumer spending. And also within that environment, if we look at what happened globally, we were and are still in quite a tough scenario globally. This year, we are potentially talking about a global recession. I hope we will be able to avoid that. But the South African consumer was caught in that. We did see employment levels going up slightly, but we're still in the top 3 if we look at unemployment as well.
Lulu, many would describe that as almost like concurrent multiple crises. I guess the question is, how are consumers reacting to that?
Well, 99% of the consumers that we surveyed actually indicated that they are really looking very carefully at costs and how they spend their money. So they're making different decisions to actually manage their costs down, and they have very specific strategies. And some of the things that we've picked up is that they are looking at products that are available on specials or promotions. They're looking at buying bulk goods and services. They are looking at where they can get their best bang for their buck. So they're making different choices amongst retailers, looking at really where they can get the best value. And also, if you look at the retailers specifically, they're looking at buying own brands from retailers. So they are using all the different channels that are available to them to actually manage down their cost.
So Anton, Suleiman, this is something I'd really like to get your guys' perspectives on. So if we're saying that 99% of consumers are adopting cost-saving behavior, how should retailers be responding, or how are they responding to that?
I think, we are lucky in South Africa to have world-class retailers that have been operating here. They are experienced at dealing with very tough circumstances, and we've certainly seen the retailers investing in their selling prices through some of the activities that Lulu mentioned, discounts, promotions, and so on. But I think the inflation in the system and that cost inflation is there, and there is more pain to come for the consumers in South Africa. The retailers are approaching this in different ways. They've always had a focus on their cost base and their cost to serve, but certainly I think this has really brought in a laser focus around how do they reduce their corporate costs, their property portfolio costs, IT costs, and I think more recently around even looking at some of their strategic projects, perhaps some delays that they'll put in place around CapEx, strategic acquisitions and that type of thing. Load shedding has also changed the landscape in South Africa and the playing field here. And retailers are really investing in the strategic relationship that they have with their suppliers, looking at the cost through the supply chain and how do they work together to reduce those costs and the cost to the customer. We've seen a little bit around the global supply chain crisis and getting goods into the country that's eased off a bit in the last little while. But I think retailers have responded to that, and in some sectors we're seeing a growth in the manufacturing capacity that they're adding, looking at areas such as apparel and so on. Our survey has also highlighted that the the consumers are engaging with our retailers in different ways. And one of those is around the click and collect space. And certainly this is a way that retailers are investing in that space to gain more market share and engage with their customers in that space.
I think Anton spoke about the strategic relationship that retailers have with their suppliers. I think that's really important. And what we're seeing is that relationship is moving away from transactional to more strategic. When the commodity prices really escalated and logistics prices quadrupled, it was about the relationship they had and understanding pretty much how can each of those parties absorb prices. They split the absorption between the supplier as well as between the retailer to manage the impact. And it was through open and transparent communications. But likewise, when they eased off, it was about understanding how can they bring some of those margins back, but at the same time maintaining the price for consumers. So it's becoming really important, but it's a relationship that's based on transparency and trust. And it's moving away from operational activities and becoming more strategic. I think that's very important, as retailers and consumers and suppliers navigate this tough economic situation.
Yeah. And one of the things that I really found, quite interesting was, or encouraging, was consumers almost indicating their appetite to pay higher than average prices, where goods were, locally produced or made through eco-friendly, using eco-friendly materials, made in a sustainable way, or made by companies with good reputations, for their ethical practices. Lulu, with your ESG hat on, what does that tell us about consumers' expectations of retailers, and how are retailers responding to that?
I think it's very interesting for me and actually really encouraging to have seen that trend with South African consumers also indicating that they're starting to think differently about ESG. We always thought that we are maybe lagging a little bit behind the rest of the world, in particular our consumers, in terms of what they are willing to do to make sure that they get the best value for their spending from an ESG perspective as well. So what are retailers doing in response? First of all, typically we have seen the focus on reporting was really on what would shareholders and what would employees and what would investors like to see. And we've seen a move from retailers to say we also really want to take serious what our customers would like to see in what we are producing in our reporting. So that's a key point. And both Anton and Suleiman mentioned that relationship with suppliers. And I think in the ESG journey, that's probably one of the most important aspects that retailers are managing and will have to manage in future. If we look at suppliers, Scope 3 emissions and the potential for more energy efficient, water efficient processes, that is really where the bulk of that sits. So working with suppliers to make sure that we actually get the best return from an ESG perspective there is also really important. And then also there's been a realization that ESG can really be a competitive advantage for companies. It can differentiate you from other competitors in the market. It can make you stand out. And as you said, consumers have indicated their willingness to say, I'm willing to pay a little bit more. We've seen a lot of focus on local manufacturing and companies and retailers actually going out and saying, we have procured this locally very clearly when you're buying something new.
So let's shift conversation a little bit. Rian, I'm going to look to yourself. Let's talk about shopping channels and how consumers shop. And one of the messages or one of the things that came out was obviously there's the stabilization of shopping behaviors. But a very interesting trend that has sort of followed pulse on pulse is this increasing number of consumers saying that they don't use devices like smartwatches or virtual home assistants or even tablets to make a purchase. Why is that the case?
I think we saw throughout the pandemic that e-commerce increased rapidly, and now some of that boom is starting to subside. I think consumers are starting to return to their pre-COVID habits. So they're starting to travel more, they're going back to shopping centers, they want those real-world connections. I think we'll always have a cohort of consumers that will use these tech devices, and particularly those use cases where wearables are used for payments. I think we'll see growth there. But by and large, what consumers want is they want the technology to enable frictionless retail experiences, both in-store and online.
So let's hold that thought on frictionless experiences, because it's something I want to come back to. But before we get there, let's talk metaverse. It's something that's new in the survey. It's obviously something that you're pretty close to. And, it came out that 1 in 4 consumers have interacted with the metaverse in some way or another, which I thought was quite high. So I guess the question is, what should retailers be doing when it comes to the metaverse?
Thanks, Kevin. That's a great question. I think the metaverse is still in a very early phase. We're still crawling. We're still trying to figure it out. What we've seen the leading brands do is start to run short, sharp experiments to drive learnings. They're trying to learn, what does it technically take to build in some of these new worlds and deliver some of these experiences. There's a lot of learnings to be had around how do you coalesce your legal, risk, and compliance teams to figure out what you want to do. And then also learning from customers. What do customers want? What experiences do they value? And some of the great examples that we've seen. So locally, Game ran a game in Roblox for Black Friday. Roblox is a platform that has 60 million daily active users. It allowed Game to interact with new consumers in a fun way and provide them vouchers for those people that played well. More traditionally, we've seen Nike, who's launched Nike Land. They've had 7 million consumers that have interacted with them in that space since its launch. And what they're able to offer is really interactive experiences and games, and being able to meet celebrities like LeBron James. In this new space, people are able to buy digital goods, and they're able to wear those digital goods throughout other different metaverse platforms. And so they're now starting to serve as digital brand ambassadors. And then very interestingly, last week, Starbucks launched their new Web3 loyalty program, Odyssey. They sold 2,000 NFTs, originally at $100 a pop, but they've been selling on the reseller market for thousands of dollars now, which is crazy. And very interestingly, those NFTs don't allow you to buy free coffees. What they do is they unlock experiences that are very valued by diehard Starbucks customers. And so we're seeing this as part of a larger trend where loyalty is less about points and discounts more, but it's now being more focused around brands providing experiences that consumers enjoy.
And I think some of those examples that you gave are almost like great illustrations of this new concept that we've been talking about, which is about being phygital. You want to just elaborate a little bit more around, what is phygital, just explaining it to me?
Sure. So phygital is really about blending digital and physical experiences together to offer seamless, frictionless retail experiences. Now, what's required to enable that? Retailers need to integrate their customer touchpoints. They need to look at their end-to-end technology stack. They need to redesign some of their processes, and they need to train both front stage and backstage staff to offer some of these new experiences. So what consumers are asking for, they're asking for the ability to get enhanced product information. Can they virtually try on or test in some way goods? Can they see historical information for the product? Are they able to pay seamlessly? Can they get access to helpers on the floor that can give them much better information? And then also, can they deliver more personalized insights to you at the point of sale, where you're actually able to make very detailed recommendations to me based on my own buying behavior?
Yeah, and picking up on, you said, personalized insights. And to me, I think that's probably a great segue into our next, topic for conversation, which is around, data and privacy. And, Anton, I'm looking for your perspectives on this, because reflecting off of what Rian said, my assumption is that customer data and the prevalence of it, is only going to go up in order to be able to achieve that sort of deep integration that Rian spoke about.
No, that's quite right. I think really the retailers are focused on ensuring that they're able to get accurate and high quality customer data. And these are things that Rian touched on in terms of purchasing history and their engagement with their customers. And it's interesting in our South African survey that our survey respondents were least concerned about providing their personal data to South African retailers, as opposed to some of the other platforms and aggregators that are out there. And this is really important, if you think about it, for our retailers to be able to provide that personalized experience and customer experience using this data to their customers. I think, really, if you haven't got high quality, accurate data to provide to your customers, or to personalize those experiences, you won't be able to deliver on that strategy.
elaborating or digging a little bit more, why are consumers more trusting of South African retailers than what they are of, let's say, social media companies?
It's a good question. And I think it probably comes back to the point that in the South African context, we've had retailers that have been operating here over generations with families. And you build that trust by really delivering on your promises, whether that's through high quality products, the prices that you deliver, and the experience that you give to your customer. And I think this is really standing our retailers in South Africa in good stead, in that customers are more prepared to share their personal data with the South African retailers.
That's great context to one of the other really interesting findings that came out, of the survey. And that was that 63% of consumers said that they don't mind sharing their personal data if it means that they get access to discounts and, tailored offerings. So Suleiman, maybe if I can pull you into the conversation on that, how is my data being collected, with me as a consumer, and, what are retailers doing with it?
Look, I think it's quite interesting. And what we're finding in the survey is showing us that 99% of consumers subscribe to at least one loyalty program. So I think that's the fundamental basis on which data is collected. But I think more importantly, it's about what are retailers doing with that data. I think it comes down to what Rian spoke about. It's about customizing the experience or customizing promotions specifically for the individuals. Are retailers there? Not necessarily. I think they're starting to customize some of the promotions targeted specifically at consumers based on their spending patterns, but that needs a lot of maturity. And I think it will improve with large volumes of data coming in, with technology improving in the form of AI. Leveraging that data will become easier. But I think that's the key to enhancing customer experience. So loyalty programs are moving away from points. I agree with you. It's about more experience. And I think that's the key focus.
So let's round out the conversation and let's talk supply chain disruptions. It's been something that's been quite topical over the past 3 years. And one of the key things that our consumers highlighted in the survey was that stock shortages, where your product's out of stock, is still one of the key issues that they experience, whether shopping in store and online. How has supply chain issues, how does it compare to the previous polls?
Yeah, I think I'd like to talk about that from two perspectives. One is the in-store experience. Our survey is showing that 70% of consumers, the biggest thing on their mind is price, and it's price of basic all those household goods and items. I think that's fundamentally what they look. 50% are more concerned about experiences that they have in store, and that translates to long queues, locations, etc. So click and collect, as Anton and Rian both mentioned, is becoming quite important. Can they enhance the experience? From an online perspective, I think, the concept of making sure the products that we see are available continues to be a key issue, whilst at the same time, it's long, unexpected delays. So you can see it's falling down to experience. And if you can enhance that, you can really appeal to your constituents.
And I think following on from that, one of the key things to look at is how are our consumers then reacting to these sort of disruptions that you spoke about?
Look, I think that's great. And it gives a perspective of an opportunity as well for retail. What consumers are doing, they're effectively shopping at multiple retailers to meet their needs. It allows them to make sure that they get what they need. But then it's also about understanding, how can they then leverage prices? And it's looking at multiple suppliers or multiple retailers, comparison sites that gives them access to multiple prices. So it's about value for them, right? Can they buy at the right price? So that's what we see from our survey coming up quite substantially.
And then in response to that, what do we see retailers doing, or what should they be doing to be able to, absorb those sort of disruptions?
Yeah, I think fundamentally, the concept about making sure that products are in stock, they're there on time, is something that retailers need to be concerned about. And how they're reacting is creating contingencies by developing local suppliers. We all know what happened during COVID. So they're working more strategically, coming back to their point with their suppliers and understanding how they can develop them. The second aspect is about what we call moving away from just in time to just in case. That does create an element of resilience, but it means managing your working capital very carefully. or you'll be overstocked. And then finally, it's around, leveraging technology, or what we call control towers, creating full visibility in your supply chain so you can be a lot more agile. So these are probably 3 areas that retailers are now focusing on to make sure that we meet consumers' needs.
Cool. So thank you guys, and thank you to everyone who has joined us. I hope you have found this discussion insightful. The report is available to download, but if you would like to reach out for a bit more of a deeper conversation or explore some of these topics a bit further, please do reach out to Anton Hugo or Suleiman Javri. Thank you.